Welcome to Lyndon B. Johnson National Historic Park. On this tour today, we're going to see a park that tells the story of our 36th president, beginning with his ancestors until his final resting place on his beloved LBJ Ranch. This is the most complete picture of any American president. We're going to see today various sites related to the life and times of LBJ, where he grew up, where he lived, that will give us a unique perspective into the influences that shaped the last frontier president, informed his policies, and defined his legacy. Starting off today just in a little museum, little exhibit about President Johnson, his legacy, and who he was before we begin our tour of the LBJ Ranch. Welcome to what once was the entrance to the LBJ Ranch. Johnson had a flair for the dramatic, and he would have folks enter the ranch through this small gate here, drive down just a little bit past the Pedernales River, as you can see over here, and then cross the river on a dam that he had built. That definitely is dramatic. Up over here, it's kind of hard to see. We'll see it here in a little bit. I may see the flags flying, is where Johnson's summer home was, or Johnson's home was. You can barely see it hidden by the trees. Constructed in 1951, the dam, which is right down here where you see the end of the water, and the crossing were the first improvements Lyndon Johnson made to the ranch after purchasing the property. He knew that water was the key to running a successful ranching operation, but in this hill country of Texas, water was not very dependable. Often there was not enough water, and at other times there was too much water, sometimes all at once. To remedy this, Marcus Berg, a local contractor from Stonewall, was hired to stretch a 9-foot-high wall of concrete across the Pedernales River. The resulting lake supplied water to irrigate pastures for Johnson's Hereford cattle, while also holding some of the water in times of flood. An added benefit, there's the home over there, was it created a swimming hole for the family. The congregation of Trinity Lutheran Church traces its history to 1902, when it was first organized in the nearby Albert, Texas schoolhouse. The members donated funds to purchase 3 acres of land overlooking the Pedernales River, and a small sanctuary was built here in 1904, just across from where Lyndon Johnson would be born in 1908. The structure you see today was constructed in 1928. It's a fine example of the Gothic Revival style of architecture. The church features lovely arched windows and door openings, a Gothic steeple, and its originally pressed metal siding. And its worship services were conducted in the German language here until the 1950s. Although President Johnson was a member of the Christian Church, or what's now known as the Disciples of Christ, and Lady Bird Johnson was Episcopalian, they would frequently attend services at Trinity Lutheran while at home on the LBJ Ranch. The church grounds also became the site for one of the first Head Start schools in the nation. Operation Head Start was a strategic program in President Johnson's Great Society educational program. Head Start provided preschool children with health, nutrition, education, and other social services. Since its founding, more than 36 million children have participated in Head Start programs, preparing them for the classroom at schools around the country. After his retirement, Lyndon Johnson would visit the Stonewall Head Start, arriving with candy for the children who knew him not as Mr. President, but as Mr. Jelly Bean. The Junction School This one-room school was very important to the rural people living in Gillespie County. Here, near their homes, the children learned the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic, enabling many of them to go on to high school and college. The schools were located close enough to children's homes to allow them to walk to school. There were 31 one-room schoolhouses located in Gillespie County. The Junction School was a typical one-room school. A wood stove sat in a sandbox in the center of the school and was the only source of heat. 2 kerosene lamps suspended from the ceiling at the opposite ends of the room provided light. The teacher's desk and chair were in front of the classroom, and a small brass bell on the teacher's desk summoned the students to class.
In Lyndon B. Johnson's words, education is the only passport from poverty. It was at this humble one-room schoolhouse known as the Junction School that Johnson's passion for education was first instilled in him. This passion would help shape legislation which focused on equal education for all children that you and I benefit from to this day. The Junction School, though humble in its appearance, had a profound impact on Johnson and his views on the importance of education, which in turn has made this one-room schoolhouse genuinely important to all of us as Americans. The Junction School was no different than any other one-room schoolhouse from that time. A wood stove was the only means of heating the school, and 2 hanging lanterns provided the students with light. Structurally, the Junction School, which educated local children from 1910 to 1947, was nothing special. But what happened inside these 4 walls has played a vital role in how America is educated today. LBJ's Junction School education began at the age of just 4 years old. Initially, Johnson's attraction to the Junction School had less to do with the 3 R's, as they were called: reading, writing, and arithmetic, and all to do with the 4-year-old yearning for companionship. You see, he could hear the sounds of children laughing from his house and couldn't resist the opportunity to play. Young LBJ's initial innocent desire for camaraderie soon blossomed into a passion for knowledge, which was typified by Johnson's insistence that he sit in his teacher, Miss Katie's lap during the lesson. This passion instilled in LBJ right here at the Junction School led him to pursue an education at Southwest Texas Teachers College in San Marcos and become a teacher himself. It was while teaching at a predominantly Mexican-American school in Catula that Johnson realized just how important it was that all children, regardless of race or social status, be afforded the same type of educational opportunity that he was at the Junction School. This passion for equal opportunity in education was not lost in his political career. Johnson went on to pass more education bills than any other president, a total of 60, most notably the Elementary and Secondary Education Act in 1965. The Elementary and Secondary Act aimed to make education as accessible and beneficial as possible for all of America's children. The Act provided funds for things such as textbooks, research centers, breakfast for school children, and so on. The Act also looked to reduce class sizes and provide bilingual education, as well as funds for the education of handicapped children. For Johnson, there was no better place to sign this monumental bill than at this unassuming one-room schoolhouse in 40. Addressing the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, LBJ had this to say: "No measure I have signed, or will ever sign, means more to the future of America." And he chose to sign this measure with Miss Katie at his side in front of this very place that sparked a passion in him that he carried for the rest of his life.
Near this site at dawn on August 27, 1908, the future 36th President of the United States was born. He was the first child of Sam Ely Johnson Jr., a state legislator, and Rebecca Baines Johnson, an educator and journalist. Lyndon Baines Johnson lived here for the first 5 years of his life. In 1964, President and Mrs. Johnson had the building in front of you constructed as a guest house for visitors at the LBJ Ranch. It stands on the site and closely resembles the original home that was removed in the 1930s. Though never intended as a literal reconstruction, the birthplace was furnished with Johnson family mementos spanning for many generations. Most of the people buried in this cemetery are related to Lyndon Johnson. The first burial occurred in 1905 and is marked by a white marble gravestone with a lamb on top and belongs, you can see the small one over there, and belongs to the president's great-grandmother, Priscilla McIntosh Button. Due to a violent spring storm and river flooding, she was unable to be buried beside her husband at the Stonewall Community Cemetery. A spot within a grove of live oak trees was chosen for her final resting place on her son-in-law's property. President and Mrs. Johnson's gravestones are the tallest red granite markers in the main row. While looking at the headstones from the main cemetery gate, the headstone to the right of the First Lady and President marked the final resting places of the President's parents and grandparents. Rebecca Johnson, the President's mother, died in 1958 while her son was Majority Leader of the U.S. Senate. Next is the burial site for Sam E. Johnson, Jr., the President's father. Sam died in 1937, a few months after Lyndon Johnson was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. The President's grandparents, Sam Eli Johnson and his wife, Elizabeth Johnson, share a headstone. To the left of the President and Mrs. Johnson are the President's brother Sam and his three sisters, Rebecca, Josepha, and Lucia. Rebecca's husband, Oscar Bobbitt, is also buried in the main row, as is Lucia's husband, Berg Alexander. The prominent gray gravestone in front marks the burial site of the President's Aunt Frank and Uncle Clarence Martin. It was the Martins' house and property that Senator Johnson acquired in 1951. After lying in state at the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C., and in his library in Austin, Texas, President Johnson's funeral was held at his ranch on a cold and rainy day of January 25th, 1973. Hundreds of people attended the funeral, which was conducted by Reverend Billy Graham. The scene was a common one. Young Lyndon Johnson, only a few years old, toddling down the road to visit his grandparents' house in this house. Here he found a ready supply of apples, candy, and affection. The future president felt a powerful attraction to his paternal grandparents, Sam Johnson and Eliza Bunton Johnson. He would always identify himself with the frontier struggles that they had endured. Sam and Eliza Johnson were among the first and most successful hill country cattle drovers, settling near what is now Johnson City in the late 1860s. After amassing a fortune, they lost it and eventually resettled here along the Pedernales, where Eliza Johnson remembered the tempo of life was much slower. Sam lived here until his death in 1915. Eliza lived here until 1917. Both are buried in the Johnson Family Cemetery. At the time of Lyndon Johnson's death in 1973, the LBJ Ranch comprised of approximately 2,800 acres. The heart of the ranch, the portion that President and Mrs. Johnson donated to the National Park Service and the Park Visitors Experience Day, total about 600 acres. The remaining 2,000 acres remained in the Johnson family, theirs to use, lease, sell, or add to over the years. Today, we travel through along the property line between the National Park and the Johnson property. Growing up in the scenic Texas Hill Country, Lyndon Johnson developed a deep appreciation and respect for the land. As part of his dream for a great society, he felt a responsibility to protect the natural heritage of the United States. During his administration, President Johnson signed nearly 300 conservation measures into law, forming the basis of the modern environmental movement. Including among the legislation were bills to ensure clean air and protect water quality. Laws governing waste disposal and pesticide use were put into effect, and he also offered protection for endangered animals. Wilderness areas and national trail systems were created. Nearly 50 new national park areas were added, and existing ones were expanded. Not only was President Johnson involved in the environment, but Lady Bird Johnson, his wife, is known as the environmental first lady. Lady Bird Johnson's environmental ethics spanned her entire lifetime of 94 years. She was a child of East Texas who spent much of her time outdoors. That sense of place that came from being close to the land never left her. She would eventually carry that with her to the White House. The Beautification Act of 1965, known as Lady Bird's Bill, is a well-known result of her tireless effort. Often associated only with wildflowers, Lady Bird Johnson emphasized that beautification meant much more. It meant clean water, clean air, clean roadsides, and preservation of landmarks, parks, and wilderness areas. Her commitment to the natural world resulted in a national awareness not seen prior to her time as First Lady, and it served as a catalyst for the modern environmental movement. Lady Bird Johnson demonstrated through the activism of one person, great change can happen. The next part of our tour at Lyndon B. Johnson National Historical Park takes us through the Texas White House complex. The first building you see here is the airplane hangar. Many people probably don't know that President Johnson had his own airplane hangar. The airplane hangar served many functions over the years. It was finished around 1959, and it was initially constructed to protect then Senator Johnson's private plane from the elements. The spacious hangar faced the taxiway. So where the parking lot here is right now is what was once the taxiway, and had a wide carport in the back. In between the hangar and the carport, two small quarters were built to house staff. Early on, the hangar was used for hay storage at one point, but during Johnson's presidency, it was a gathering place for community and political events, as well as for official press conferences. The hangar was even used as a movie theater for the Johnson family and friends. Today, it has been repurposed as the LBJ Ranch District Visitor Center. There's exhibits, a park film, and bookstores inside. Parties and dinners were often held in the hangar as well. On November 6, 1968, a dinner for military support personnel and their families was held. President Johnson spoke to the approximately 300 people in attendance with his grandson, Patrick Lyndon Nugent, by his side. In October 1961, the United States Air Force replaced twin-engine, propeller-driven aircraft with the four-engine Lockheed Jetstar for executive transport. Lyndon Johnson was the first vice president to have an aircraft assigned to him. His choice was this Lockheed Jetstar C-140B. As president, he continued to use the Jetstar for travel to and from his ranch. He jokingly referred to the plane as Air Force 1.5, although it did bear the call sign Air Force One. Advances in aviation played a major role in the success of the LBJ Ranch, functioning as a remote White House for President Johnson in the 1960s. At that time, aviation technology improved fuel efficiency and reduced flight times. While the larger Boeing 707, popularly known as Air Force One, never landed on the ranch airstrip, it did fly to either San Antonio's Randolph Air Base or Austin's Bergstrom Air Force Base. From there, the president would be shuttled to his ranch via helicopter, which is referred to as Marine One, or by this Jetstar. Of course, while the president was aboard the smaller aircraft, it was always designated as Air Force One, even though he jokingly referred to it as Air Force One and a half. This particular Jetstar was purchased by the National Park Service in 2010. It was found outside an Air Force or an airplane boneyard outside Tucson. It had been decommissioned for about 23 years. In 1951, Senator Lyndon B. Johnson, set out to establish a home base where he could continue his work away from Washington. To improve access to his ranch, he added a 3,000-foot grass landing strip in 1953. That landing strip is was right over about there. By the time Johnson became president, a series of improvements had resulted in a 6,300-foot asphalt airstrip that served a variety of aircraft. The expanded airstrip, however, could not support the weight of a Boeing 707, which normally is referred to as Air Force One, or Air Force One at the time. As a result, Johnson often landed at an air base in Austin or San Antonio. He boarded this small Jetstar or a helicopter as Marine One, and that took him here to the ranch.
Is anyone else in there? What are they doing?
In 1951, the LBJ Ranch had but just one single telephone when he purchased it in 1951. By the time he became vice president in 1960, the array of technology had grown to 15 long and local distance phone lines, as well as a 50-foot tall antenna to supply reception for 3 televisions, one for each network. Johnson was a huge television watcher, would have each of the networks on and 3 separate TVs, not only in the White House, but here at the Texas White House. Despite these upgrades, Johnson's rise to the presidency in November 1963 demanded a modern system allowing secure communication throughout the United States and the world. Within 4 weeks of becoming president, the LBJ Ranch had enough equipment for a small city. Microwave towers providing 120 channels to Austin, 2-way radios, teleprinters, cryptographic machines, and an extensive telephone system with over 100 lines. These trailers here that you see in front of us were the communications complex at the Texas White House. These structures house the switchboard for the White House Communication Agency, a cryptographic section, and quarters for the military aides and other personnel who were on call 24 hours a day. The assassination of President Kennedy in 1963 necessitated the establishment of a complex presidential communications network at the ranch. In relatively short time, telephones, telegraph equipment, microwave relay towers that were spy-proof, tap-proof were all installed. After the president's term in office and until Mrs. Johnson's death, the White House Communication Agency continued its presence at the ranch in service of U.S. Secret Service communication. Any equipment not authorized for service of the former president was removed after the death of Lady Bird Johnson. This small cottage that you see here was originally constructed on the south side of the Pedernales River, where today the Lyndon B. Johnson State Park exists. It was used by the Beckman family until the 1940s for about a decade. It was abandoned and left unoccupied. The family sold the house to Lyndon Johnson, and it was moved to this location here in the 1950s. Initially, the cottage was used for employees of the LBJ Ranch, although the U.S. Secret Service had a presence on the ranch beginning with Johnson's vice presidency in 1961. The agency did not have permanent quarters. Initially, agents assigned to the ranch had posts in the Klein shop or even their automobiles. At some point early in the Kennedy-Johnson administration, a trailer was placed on the house. After Johnson became president in November 1963, the Secret Service continued to use the trailer until about 1966, and about that point they moved into this cottage. This historic barn is known as the Martin Barn. It was constructed by Judge Clarence and Frank Martin, the president's uncle and aunt, in the 1930s. Over 30 years later, President Johnson wanted to tear the structure down. However, the family architect, Roy White, felt that the barn complemented the landscape as well as the house, and family and friends pleaded with for its preservation. In the end, Johnson decided that the barn would be saved and it was rehabilitated. Before construction of the Klein shop in 1967, and before ranching operations were moved northwest of here along the airstrip, the barn had corrals, 4 pens, a chute, and grass patch where up to 60 cattle could be held at one time. By the mid-1960s, the cattle operation had grown, as had the function of the Texas White House. The building was needed for White House communications, as well as Mrs. Johnson decided that she wanted the cattle all moved away from this house because they really smelled and stunk up the house. We now move on to our final stop on the tour, and that is the Texas White House. This is the home of Lyndon and Lady Bird Johnson at the LBJ Ranch. It was a place of family and of politics. During his 5-year administration, President Johnson spent a quarter of his time here, 74 visits totaling about 490 days. To the world, it became known as the Texas White House. But for the Johnson family, it was simply known as our heart's home. While Lyndon Johnson was growing up, it was the home of his uncle Clarence and aunt Frank Martin. Some of the earliest memories as a young boy were of the big house on the river. The house he loved for decades became his in 1951 after he purchased it in approximately 240 acres from his widowed aunt. As his career grew, so did the house and its functions. The Johnsons added an office in 1958 when he was Senate Majority Leader. In 1962, the dining room and kitchen were both extended to create additional space for entertaining when he was Vice President. Additional bedrooms were added. Additional bedrooms and bathrooms were created and remodeled to house invited guests, including such world-famous leaders as the President of Mexico, the West German Chancellor, and the Israeli Prime Minister. In 1967, late in his presidency, the couple added 2 master suites for the comfort of their upcoming environment. In the end, the Texas White House expanded to include 28 rooms, 8 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, and it spans over 8,400 square feet. In July 1955, then Senator Johnson suffered a severe heart attack at a friend's estate in Virginia. After nearly a month at Bethesda Naval Hospital and another month resting at home in Washington, D.C., he was permitted by his doctors to return to his Texas ranch for further recovery. Even before the heart attack, the Johnsons were planning to build a swimming pool southeast of their home. During his convalescence, the pool, a cabana, and area landscaping were added under his watchful eye. Often the president would come out, take up a chair, and observe what was once the gaping hole, and really had a play in working with the construction workers to construct this pool. This particular pool was big enough for him to do laps that helped with his recovery. And like the ranch, it often became a place for family and a place for politics. In 1955, this building over here, the pool house, was added, served as a place for pool maintenance and equipment, and also as a cabana with changing rooms for men and women. Down here along the banks of the Pedernales River was what was known as the Barbecue Grove. Lyndon and Lady Bird Johnson often hosted large Texas-style barbecues down here. Sometimes hundreds of guests would dine on delicious Texas barbecue ribs, brisket. There would be bands, guitars, trumpets, mariachi bands. These outdoor barbecues were a great show, great fun, and knowing Lyndon B. Johnson, they were all about politics. Many guests from Mexico, West Germany, Pakistan, and other nations came to this grove and attended the barbecues. So I hope you've enjoyed this tour of Lyndon B. Johnson home at the Lyndon B. Johnson National Historic Park and a tour of the LBJ Ranch. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on our next walk. Bye now.